Welcome back, everybody. It is John Pollock here at Post Wrestling, and joining us today, a man who is a friend of the site, the mayor of Montreal himself, Pat Laprade, who is joining us. We have so much to discuss with Pat. Always a great time sitting down with you. How are you today, Pat?
Very good yourself.
You know, the last time we had you on, it was the Monday after WrestleMania weekend. And in that time, the entire industry has changed. So I thought it would be apropos that we could get a big update and some of your thoughts. And a lot of them center around a WWE that is now navigating itself without Vince McMahon. The first time in, our lifetimes that, it's, Vince McMahon taking over in 1982. And now it's sort of uncharted waters for the company. And I just wanted to get some of your thoughts about the early impressions you've seen of this massive shift in the company's direction.
Well, obviously you can see that, Hunter wants to bring back a strong women's division. That I think that's his priority. He wants to bring back the guys and girls that he thought, should have never been fired. People like Dakota Kai, Dexter Lumis, Karrion Kross, and I think we are having a flavor of what Hunter wants, what he likes, what he wants to showcase. I mean, it's going to be on the long run. You cannot judge the product now and compare it to whatever Vince did for the past 10, 20 years. But in the long run, I'm hoping that Hunter will be able to bring I don't want to say a better product, but a different product than what we were having. And you could the term, some of the terms have come back, wrestling, wrestler, stuff like that. That
we've got hospitals, Pat. Hospitals are back in full force.
Exactly. So I mean, those were nonsense to me. I don't think Triple H is about nonsense. Will it be perfect? No, it's going to be his vision. And, a lot of people are raving about AEW, but a lot of people are also criticizing some of the stuff that Tony does, the same way people will, I'm hoping, be raving about WWE product, but still criticize what needs to be criticized, But I do believe it's going to be, we're going to have a better Monday night and a better Friday night than we used to.
For Levesque, I mean, this was, a very abrupt shift that all of a sudden he's going from, kind of overseeing this NIL program, but very much sort of in the background after his health issue last year, taken away from NXT, and boom, he is thrust into overseeing creative for everything. Do you think it helps the fact that he had that removal from NXT with that time of reflection? Or do you think it would have been an easier transition if he had been in a creative capacity all this time and sort of being groomed for this role? Because this is a major change for him and the duties he's taking on, along with still overseeing talent relations, which is its own full-time job.
Yeah. And also don't forget that in a very long time, it's the first time that someone is completely in charge, in the sense that Levesque is the one who's hiring people, and he's also the one booking the show, which was not always the case in the past. Vince always had a say in this, but he had someone to take care of talent relation. Now Triple H holds both titles. That said, I always said that the best thing for this transition would have been for Vince McMahon, a little bit like in the movie The Godfather, to step aside, be some kind of a consigliere, the guy who used to be in charge, who just stepped down, let the new kid in town, in charge, and just advise him wisely. And I always thought that it should have been the plan from the get-go, but that Vince would have never, it should have been that, but we know Vince, and he was never gonna step aside from, we always say that he was going to die on the job, right? And we just didn't expect what actually happened. So of course I believe that Levesque would have benefited more from being in charge with a structure, with a plan to make him the next one to be heading Raw and SmackDown and WWE. It didn't happen that way. He's been in company for a long time. He's been groomed to some capacities for a long time. So it's not like it's, out of the blue, but at the same time, it happens so fast that it's not optimal. So that's why I don't want to judge him on his early decisions. I want to judge him in the long run. And by WrestleMania next year, we should have a pretty good idea of what kind of product we're going to have from Levesque for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I've kind of echoed the same sentiment that this very much has, the feeling of a freshness that, in time that will wear off. And then you're really going to see the philosophical ideas of Hunter and differences too from NXT. I don't think you're necessarily looking at 2018 NXT and you just extrapolate that onto Raw and SmackDown. There is still like a large audience that are watching these shows that you are inheriting, and you don't want to run off any of that audience with too radical of a change as well. It's an interesting balancing act he has to come in with, and not with necessarily a lot of the players that he was assembling that team, a lot of whom have moved on with the cuts over the last 2 years.
And talking about NXT, I do think that there's going to be a better, the NXT and the main roster will cohabit much better than it used to, even when Triple H was running NXT, because Sean and Hunter will probably have a better communication. They'll see more eye to eye. How many times we've seen someone getting over on NXT being brought to the main roster and didn't get the same reaction, wasn't used the same way. Vince didn't see what Levesque saw on for particular talent on NXT. So I do think that we're going to have a better transition for the farm team to go on the main roster and keep thriving. It's like in hockey. You have a 50 goal scorer in the AHL in your farm team. If you bring him to the big club and you put him on the fourth line for 2 minutes, he won't be able to give you 50 goals. But that's why you brought him on the main team. That's why you brought him to the NHL, right? So I think we're going to see that in a much better way. We're going to see guys and girls on NXT being brought to the main roster with the same character, same gimmick, and it's going to be just a push that will continue for them instead of changing character. And we sided with Karrion Kross, right?
Yeah.
What did McMahon did with Karrion Kross? He got Scarlett out of the act, and it took away so much from the old presentation. What did Levesque do on his first night back? When Kross came back, he gave him Scarlett back. It changed everything to me. So I think we're going to see more of that.
When it comes to Vince McMahon, and here's somebody that in a couple of weeks he'll be turning 77 years old. Mm-hmm. Is this kind of the final chapter of Vince McMahon in terms of a public profile, or do you feel that there is another one that this guy has in him, not going out on such a low note of his career that the scandal has provided? I'm just curious of like what this individual is going through at this moment where he does not have work as his outpost, which has defined his entire adult life.
Well, don't you think that Stephanie won't give him a call from time to time to ask for something, to ask his advice? He won't be, I don't think he's going to be involved in any important decision, but there's no laws that says that Stephanie cannot give him a call, or Levesque can give him a call and just ask for an advice or two. But
I guess is he happy enough to just get the odd, someone coming to pick his brain every now and then of a guy that was just wired to work 24/7 and he is sitting on a fortune if he is looking at doing something later. It's just, I'm sure he never believed he would have to come to this crossroads in his life where he would not have his company to run. I very much believe, as you said, he was going to work until the last day that he was breathing. And now all of a sudden you're on the outside, and what are you filling all that time with?
But what else you want him to do? He's not going to start another wrestling company. That's for sure. I mean, um, you know what? I wouldn't even be surprised as if one day they put him in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm not saying it should be that, but um, I'm just saying that it wouldn't surprise me if one day in 3, 4, 5 years to celebrate his 80th birthday that they got him in the Hall of Fame and he gets back to some kind of a public figure because of that. But in the meantime, I mean, with everything that's going on, with more and more things that we are learning about the payments he made and all that, he should lay low. And I don't know how he's able to do that. I don't know how he can spend his time other than what he used to, but he's gonna have to find a way to do that.
There's only so many workouts you can do on a daily basis, but it's so interesting that here is
Yeah,
a person that, I mean, probably had very few hobbies that were non-work related, and here he is with more time on his hands than ever. But I
maybe
agree
he'll
with you.
go
I just think he's so off limits at this point for this company to really want to have anything. I mean, that
exactly.
was so evident. The Raw after the announcement, like not even an actual mention of his name. Like it's just he's completely off limits.
Exactly. You cannot blame a daughter to speak to her father, but as the CEO, co-CEO of the company, I mean, you don't want her to be known that, I don't know, that or the former CEO who's been accused of so many things, that he's still involved in some kind of decisions, right? But he's gonna have to learn to do something else. He'll go to the movies, maybe this is his time to finally be able to see what's out there in the world, except from his own WWE world, or should I say universe.
Were you surprised at all of just the idea, if I were to throw this at you a year ago, Pat, of Vince McMahon is going to go through a multitude of scandals and hush money payments, and he's going to be ousted from his company, and WWE is going to largely transition. The stock has remained, at its level. They have not really taken much of a hit. Vince McMahon has, but the company has, navigated what I would say most would have looked at as this tumultuous predicament of Vince McMahon being booted out of that company.
If you would have told me that a year ago, I mean, we kind of always heard rumors about stuff with Vince, right? So I couldn't say that it would have surprised me. A year ago, what would have surprised me if you would have told me that Vince McMahon was no longer in charge of WWE.
Mm-hmm.
No reason asked, just that he wouldn't be there a year ago. I said, you're crazy. I'm blocking you for social media, John. You've gone rogue. But but
Pat's
to
already done that.
but the fact that with the Me Too movement, with the speaking out movement, it was just a matter of time before his name was going to get called.
Yeah,
And we,
I don't
we
mean so
all
much
we all knew that.
surprised at what came out, more so just that the company transitioned and did not take this. Like we saw when George Barrios and Michelle Wilson
Yep.
left, like that was a noticeable drop that it seemed like the stockholders were very caught off guard by this. And here you're talking about someone at the highest position, and it's this was not a disastrous
No,
reaction at
it
all.
was, and the funny part is that it was a disclaimer of on the WWE corporate side. It's a disclaimer. It was a disclaimer that if one day, for whatever reason, Vince McMahon is no longer in charge, that the company would not be the same anymore. It was one of their disclaimers, and it happened. But the thing is, I'm not the big finance guy, but from what I understood, is that Wall Street thinks that the company has a better chance of getting sold because of Vince leaving, and that's why that the stock didn't take a hit and it actually increased. So, is it going to happen? I have no idea. It might happen. Maybe there's more chances now than when Vince was running things, but that's the only reason why. It had nothing to do with Vince leaving or the accusation made. It was really just a matter of Wall Street thinking that, well, maybe this company will be sold. So just it's all about speculations. Like I said, I'm not, the big wise finance guy, but uh, I understood that, and that's why. But I was surprised though, because exactly I didn't understand, what those speculations were going to be. But if there's one thing, is that Vince McMahon leaving didn't seem to bother Wall Street at all, and didn't seem to. I'm enjoying more of what I'm seeing on my TV right now than 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago. So far so good, I guess.
Would you look at this in terms of of an impact when it comes to AEW? Like up until Cody Rhodes, it's been a lot of one-way traffic of talent going one direction to AEW. What position does this now place AEW, and is this now a more competitive marketplace
Of course.
for the talent?
Of course, because people know what Levesque can bring to the table. They've seen what he's done with NXT. Someone like Johnny Gargano, who hasn't signed anywhere yet, from what we know. Well, maybe Levesque already called him, or vice versa. That's someone that you want to work for. And I do think that the way Vince was running things may have gotten some people to say, well, you know what, I don't want to go to WWE. That said, the way they treated Cody when he came back, that was a big plus. So for some people, just the way Cody was treated was perhaps enough to consider WWE when their contract would be up. But the fact that now Triple H is there, I just think it's a better there's a better chance that a lot of, and not only there's a better chance of AEW talent going to or considering AEW, but there's a better chance of a Hunter going to try and get some of the talent that he always wanted to have when he was running NXT. So Vince would have not gotten. I don't see Vince as going to. Oh, you know what? I want MJF from AEW, but I see Levesque do that. I see Levesque say, you know what, Omega this time I won't let it go, and I really want him. And maybe these guys will consider it more. Maybe it won't change anything. Maybe it will be a money matter. Maybe it won't. So we'll see. But of course, it's going to be more competitive now for AEW. And Tony Khan, kind of said so as well in some interviews he did. He's nobody is being a fool here. We all know that Hunter being in charge changed a lot of things.
Both companies are going to be coming to Canada over the next couple of months. We've got Raw here in Toronto in just a couple of weeks on August 22nd. And the Friday before that, SmackDown is in Montreal at the Bell Center. Starting off just with those two, these are going to be homecomings in Montreal for Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who are coming off incredibly prominent roles at this past year's WrestleMania. And it seems like with Kevin Owens back on television now, they're reigniting him with a big angle on Monday, laying out Ezekiel. Can you convey to me the popularity, as you have followed these two on the main roster, of where it is coming out of WrestleMania? Because these were two of the main players at this year's Mania. I would argue after that weekend that the true main event felt like Austin's return with Owens.
Oh, definitely. In Montreal, in the province of Quebec, everybody was talking about Kevin Owens and Stone Cold Steve Austin because it's Kevin and because it's Stone Cold. Because in Quebec, because Kevin did more interviews and he's more Sammy is more an anglophone than a francophone, and although he speaks French very, very well, and I always tell him that he always thinks of himself as a bad that he doesn't speak French well, but he does. But Kevin is more fluent in French. He did more interviews, and he was in a more prominent role with WWE, with the Universal title and everything. So he's a little bit more known in the province of Quebec than Sammy, and he was a star that weekend. Everybody wanted to talk about him, to him, or to me, because they couldn't get to him. It was just crazy. Plus, you had Stone Cold, which is, the Attitude Era and, one of the biggest stars of all time that, you don't need to follow wrestling to know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is. So it was just crazy, the level of publicity that this match had here. Sammy also was in a very good role with Johnny Knoxville. So both were mentioned. Kevin was leading the field, but I mean, this match with Johnny Knoxville was very special, and even Sammy said that it was one of his favorite matches of all time. Coming to Montreal, I mean, we haven't had Kevin in Montreal in, I want to say, 3 years, if it's not four.
Right.
So it's been a while. It's been a while since we had Kevin here. So I'm expecting the people to go, just as Pat Patterson would say, people will go banana for them.
Yeah,
There's
the
no
WrestleTix, which monitors all of the tickets
Yep.
out. I mean, the Toronto show is approaching like 11,000 tickets out. I think Montreal's coming up on like 9. So we're looking at like there's going to be over like 20,000 between these two shows.
And there's also, John, a house show the Sunday night before Toronto. There's a house show in
Right.
Quebec City, and the company hasn't been in Quebec City in 8 or 9 years. So it's been a very long time, and it's the first time at the Videotron Center, the new arena that was built for the Quebec Nordiques, that never came back. And there's like already more than 5,000 tickets sold,
Yeah.
which is a very good number, as you know. And the last time they came to Quebec City, it was like 3,000 people, and that's why they never
Wow.
came back. So it's, the province of Quebec are really really excited. Is really really excited to see both Kevin and Sammy. Sammy will be at the house show in Quebec City, not Kevin, but at least in Montreal, both of them will be there. So it's very cool. And I know Toronto, you guys will have Raw, and the month after you'll get Dynamite and Rampage. So a lot of wrestling in Canada, in coming into fall.
Yeah, before we talk about AEW's Canadian debut, how has the local scene in Montreal and surrounding, like at the independent level, how has it come back out of the pandemic? Has it been a struggle? Has there been a big demand? What have you observed?
A big demand. I mean, it was on the rising before the pandemic, and it came back right where it left. NSPW in Quebec City ran this summer a huge show with only one name from big indie name, if I could say, which is Jonathan Gresham.
Hmm.
All of the rest were local talent, and they drew, how much did they do? They drew 13 or 1400 people
Oh wow.
at a baseball stadium in Quebec City. They are running a big theater in Quebec City, and are able to sell it out every single time with between 500 and 600 people. In Montreal, you have the IWS, who is running some of the biggest and nicest venues outside of the Bell Center, obviously, in downtown Montreal. And they just had a show last weekend with Mike Bailey, with Joey Janela, with Ruby So, with Angelo Parker, and local talent, and they drew 1,100 people. So I mean, the scene is going very very well. Um, I almost say better than it was when the pandemic started. So really, we're really really happy with everything that's going on here. I mean, I'm just talking about these two promotions,
Right.
but there's other promotions all over the province, in Montreal, but also everywhere in the province of Quebec that do very well as well. So no, I mean. The pandemic, as in it was hard for 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years, but when it really started back, it went back to where it left.
AEW is coming to Toronto October 12th and 13th. They have back-to-back nights at the Coca-Cola Coliseum, which
Mhm.
I imagine will be scaled for around like 8 to 9,000. Are you expecting two sellouts for these shows? And if so, how important these shows are just in terms of AEW finally getting into the country? And I mean, it would be a natural of multiple markets up here that they could make regular tour stops.
I was actually surprised by the choice of venue.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
really thought that I really think that there's a missed opportunity here where they could have sold out. What is it called now? The former Air Canada Center?
the
Is it the
Scotiabank Arena.
Scotiabank Arena? I really think there's a missed opportunity here.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. The first time in a big market like Toronto, It would be like, I mean, they haven't used the MSG in New York City, but they used a big stadium, 20 plus thousand people. So it's not the same thing. But now they're using the smaller arena. I know it's for 2 nights. Maybe that's what make them choose 2 nights over one big night at the big arena. But I don't know. I was very, very surprised. I mean, there was even talk that that people there would be so many people wanting tickets for the first Toronto show that some people were talking about the Rogers Center, and now you're going from there to the Coca-Cola Coliseum, which, like you said, what, 9,000-10,000 people. So I was really, really, I do think the market could have is strong enough to get one big sellout at the Scotiabank. And if you want to do 2 and 2, use the Coca-Cola Coliseum for the Rampage taping. I don't mind that. But yeah, I don't know.
I know that week, I know there were some conflicts at the Scotiabank Arena, but to your point, like, did it have to be this week? Because I honestly believe, and I meant when Tony Khan was up here a few months ago, like, I mentioned to him, like I said, like, oh, if you book a weekend pay-per-view at the Rogers Center, I'm not saying you're filling the Rogers Center, but with all the people that would travel for that show from Montreal, from Buffalo, from Ottawa, just all the surrounding areas for a weekend where you do Rampage and a pay-per-view, I think they could put in $30K in the Rogers Center for a big pay-per-view for a weekend. I don't know how much travelers you're going to get middle of the week in October.
Exactly.
But
that was my estimate too. A big pay-per-view on a Saturday night or Sunday night in Toronto would have done fantastic. So I don't know what was the logic, behind this. They, like you said, maybe they wanted to come as fast as they could and didn't want to wait for, that big opportunity of doing something big at the Rogers Center. But I was surprised. That said, with all this, I do think that they're going to be able to fill out twice the Coliseum in the middle of the week. That's 20,000 people total. I do think that this is enough for the Toronto market. And I mean, it's going to be the first time in Canada. People, the Ontario market is big enough that people will make the drive. Maybe not from Montreal, or maybe, some people from Montreal will drive. I know that. I've heard people from Montreal saying we won't miss that show. But it won't be the same thing as if it was a weekend. That's for sure.
The natural one, if you just are waving your magic wand and they're running Montreal, is the Bell Center the automatic choice? Where would you go?
Montreal is the Bell Place. The equivalent of the Coca-Cola Coliseum.
Right.
Montreal is in the same market as Toronto. I mean, WWE is doing well when they run the Bell Place. They run it twice so far. And it's
we really have our competition here between the Rogers buildings here and Bell over in Quebec. I mean, just the warring telecommunications companies.
Yeah, I know. And
Rogers not doing so well this year after that outage last month.
And there's the Videotron Center, which is owned by Quebec, which is TVA Sports, where WWE is on TV here. So yeah, I mean, Bell Place would be where I would go. It can fit 10,000 people. They wouldn't fit it out, but I would see at least 6,000 or 7,000 people, which you don't want to have at the Bell Center. You want that in a smaller arena, so it looks bigger bigger crowd than it is. It looks filler. So I would actually do that if I was them. Yep. But you know what, John? I'm expecting them to go to Winnipeg first. I always said Toronto, Winnipeg, Montreal would be in order because of Winnipeg, because of Jericho, because of Kenny, even Don Callis, if he comes back with Kenny. So.
It makes a lot of sense that Winnipeg would be on their radar. One other subject I wanted to chat about with you, and it kind of got me thinking as well, because there was such a reaction last week when Paul Levesque updated the historical record of Vince McMahon taking pro wrestling out of bars and onto a global platform. And I'm just kind of curious, like, your thoughts of, in terms of, such a huge amount, I feel, of people's wrestling knowledge is through a lot of the WWE's narrative. Where do you think, like, the overall, like, knowledge base and education level is at when you are someone that you are, one of the, top historians out there? Do you think it's in a good place that there is enough of, like, the true history of professional wrestling out there, or is so much of it concentrated that a line like that, many people are just going to nod and take someone's word like that as that must be true?
When I heard that, it was like, geez, I didn't know the Mid-South Coliseum was a bar. I didn't know that the LA Coliseum was a bar. I didn't know any of this. That was something. The fact is,
and you know that Paul Levesque is someone that's like, it's like, this is a guy that
he knows better.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like, that's a calculated line and not one that is just purely out of ignorance.
No, not at all. But I mean, it's there's some stories like this that even though they know the truth, they've been saying this for so long, or they've been, not telling the truth for so long, or telling the same stories for how many years, that now they just repeat it and repeat it again and again. It's like the whole story with the Montreal screw job, where Vince was scared that Brett would show up the next day on Nitro, which would have never been the case. So, but they keep saying that. So I mean, there's like a lot of good books, a lot of good documentaries that people can watch, can read, and that will tell them what really happened in the history of pro wrestling. The difference is that people don't always take the time to read or to search for those. So they're watching what they're watching. They're watching the network. They're going to read a few lines from an interview online, and that's going to be their knowledge. But it's not like the information is not out there. It is. You just need to find it. So I mean, how many of us have written the history of pro wrestling, different territories or as a whole? Me, Bertrand Hébert, Greg Oliver, Mike Monaghan, Dave Meltzer. I mean, how many of us have written about this? Tim Homebaker.
Yeah, fantastic stuff.
Exactly. You can find all the information there. You just need to take a few minutes and read and find those. But in the meantime, WWE was still. I'm hoping that with time this will change, that the philosophy will be different as Levesque takes more and more experience as being the top guy. But this is way too soon for it to be. And what he said was, I don't want to say troubling, or like, I'm just worried that he will keep that company line of, oh yeah, Vince, kept. I mean, I was in shock when I heard that. I was like, he took it from bars, really? Not even bingo halls. We're not even bingo halls anymore.
No, the smoky arenas are now like we've downscaled from the smoky arenas. It's now,
it's like, and the fact is, they own NWA footage. We can show you that. I mean, there were like arenas being used.
Vince's father. I mean, it's amazing when you
Philadelphia. I mean, the MSG and the Spectrum and all those. I mean, that is the Garden in Toronto, the Montreal Forum. Tell me the Montreal Forum was a bar. Jeez, that's crazy. That's just crazy.
Yeah,
I understand what he meant. He brought pro wrestling to another level. Explain it like this. Say that he brought pro wrestling. He had a vision to combine pro wrestling and entertainment, and he did succeed in that. And he did. I mean, WrestleMania was something that we had never seen before, and especially WrestleMania 3. But that concept was somehow new, or at least he really succeeded at it. But don't say that he took wrestling from bars when he started the company in Untitled Sports in 81, 82. Don't say that. But there's a way of saying things, and I'm hoping that someday Levesque will be able to correct himself.
When it comes to a subject that you're covering that maybe is from multiple eras ago, and it's prone to tall tales, like these are wrestlers that are typically there to sell stories as larger than life. It's sometimes not always just trying to be deceptive. It's in their nature. Does it just take for you building those relationships with people that they're going to have that trust that they can truly, because you and Bertrand broke down to me like the ultimate myth of, Andre the Giant is maybe one of the toughest tasks in terms of separating fact from fiction. And I'm just wondering how you tackle that with, people from another generation that it's just it's just wired towards their DNA of like these tall tales and getting to the truth of the matter.
You see, Andre was something, but in that regard, the Mad Dog Vachon book was even more challenging because Maurice would say the same story many times, but with time, it was always exaggerated. So we had a rule, Bertrand and I, that the earliest Maurice told a story, the closer to the truth it was. So if we had a version of him saying the plain story with the AWA in I don't know 1985, and we had one from 95, and we had one from 2005. Well, the 2005 was mostly exaggerated, and the one closer to the truth was the 85 one. So that was our rule of thumb for Vachon. As far as Andre, it was challenging in other ways because we wanted to learn where the myth came from, and we wanted to be able to explain to the reader, well, this is what has been told for many years, this is where it came from, and this is the truth. So it was challenging in other ways, but the more people we're talking to were there's always going to be, in wrestling, there's always going to be stories that you'll never know the whole truth, or you'll never be sure. Like with Andre, the number of beers he drank.
Yeah,
it's that number is up for grabs. And if you talk to people, it happened 10 times in 10 different cities the same night. And my guess is that it happened once, but with time, it seems like everybody was there that night. And not everybody was there that night, but some people like to tell stories and put themselves in a story where they weren't. So you always need to try to see and to look, between what people are saying. And I don't know, with time, I was able to have a sixth sense of when someone was telling me a story where, you know what, I'm not even sure you were there that night, but there's no proof of that. But there's always going to be misinformation because, that question came from what Levesque said. And there's always going to be misinformation in pro wrestling. Every year I have to explain to social media that Andre didn't die on that date, but the following day. Now I think the Wikipedia, I changed it. And I think that nobody has changed it back, because the first time I changed it, someone went back to the old version. I was like, geez, I have the death certificate as a proof. Stop arguing with me, So I'm hoping that this year,
if there's one person that gets the final word on this, it is Pat Laprade with that death certificate.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that this next January I won't have to do that. But there's always going to be those, and it's just a matter of it's challenging. But when you talk to many old timers, you end up having just a sense of what is exaggerated, what is true, and you cannot always verify it with other other people, newspapers at the time. So sometimes people will tell me that just in Montreal, it's sometimes it's perception as well. The war between Grand Prix Wrestling and All Star Wrestling. If you talk to Ray Rougeau would tell you that Grand Prix Wrestling was just a flash in the pan, and it didn't last long, and they didn't really bother them. If you talk to Paul Vachon, he will tell you that they beat the shit out of All-Star Wrestling for 2 years. And when you look at the fact, the truth is closer to what Paul says than what Ray says. But I won't have this argument with Ray because that's how he remembers it.
Yeah.
but I know what the truth is, or what is closer to the truth, because you can look at numbers. You can look at, how many times they ran the Montreal Forum, the crowds they drew, the popularity they had in newspapers at the time. But sometimes you just need to let things go and don't get into an argument with someone who's telling you things that And I've been told. I mean, I've talked to so many guys over the years, and I knew when, someone was telling me a story, and I was like, yeah, I know this one didn't happen the way you're telling me, but I'll let you finish, and I'll ask another question, and we'll just move on.
Yeah, it's often something I think about, is that 30 years from now, how will this be a drastically different era where there's just so much more transparency now. We have all of this data stuff that's on the record, but memories, people tend to have short-term memories. Like, as you mentioned, like the Montreal Screwjob has been documented. Like, there's been documentaries, there's been newsletters, like everything possible. And yet you still have people kind of clinging to what their belief of it is. But, you do have, I think, a generation of people that have kind of come up with this in wrestling, that I do believe there are ones in there that genuinely want to be authentic and provide the real truth. And hopefully that is something that, is consistent over time.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping, and that's one of the reasons why people like Bertrand and I are doing those books, to make sure that these things are documented, that we spoke, and like the Montreal book, we did it at the right time, because a lot of the people we talked to are now have now passed away. So it was, and I mean, the Gino Britos and the Paul Vachons and all those guys are not getting any younger,
Yeah.
So it's fun to have those stories. You just need to be able to navigate into what's true, what's not. I mean, in Quebec, someone like Jacques Rougeau is known to be a very good storyteller, but very far from the stories that actually happened. So you just need to be able to see through that and come up with what really happened.
Well, you are the fact checker that we will all rely upon, Pat, when it comes to the history of all of these figures. But it's always great to catch up with you, Pat, and I definitely want to give you the forum here. Pat, along with Bertrand Hébert, have put out some of the best wrestling books that are out there. The definitive looks at Mad Dog Vachon, Andre the Giant. Pat also worked with Dan Murphy on Sisterhood of the Squared Circle. And the floor is yours, Pat, of what's going on with you, with the podcast, with Kevin Raphael. What is coming up in the world of Pat Laprade?
Well, it's actually a hockey book that's coming up. I actually wrote the biography of a former Montreal Canadian, Butch Bouchard, who used to play defense, was the captain for the Montreal Canadiens in the 40s and the 50s, Hall of Famer, numbers is retired. So it's one of the most famous players here for the Montreal Canadiens. That's coming up in October. It's going to be my first hockey book. I'm going for Greg Oliver now. So, and but aside from that, on the wrestling side, Kevin and I still do commentary for WWE Raw, 1 hour every Wednesday night here on TVA Sports. We have our podcast, Les Antipodes de la Lutte, biggest French podcast in Canada, every Thursday. And I have my French column as well on tvasports.ca. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much involved in a few other projects here in Quebec, following the indie scene as well. So keeping myself busy on wrestling as well, but trying to go into hockey too. So we're from Canada, so hockey is a big thing. It was actually my first love before wrestling. So now I'm going back at it, but I don't forget wrestling for that.
There you go. Branching out in the world of hockey as well, but keeping those professional wrestling
and
roots.
people can follow me on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pat Laprade.
Yes, a must follow. I recommend all of his books. And Pat, it's always great to catch up with you. We will definitely do this again soon because there's never a shortage of stuff to chat about. So it was great to pick your brain and discuss all the latest that is going on. So that's going to wrap it up for us. You can go up to postwrestling.com for all of the latest news and give Pat a follow at Pat Laprade and follow all of his projects that are going on. And that's going to wrap us up for another edition here at Post Wrestling.